Hey,
I'm muted. Hey,
how are you?
good. Uh, did you start the recording already?
I did, but I'm gonna Hi Justin, hi Davinia. We'll give people a few minutes to hop on before we get started.
Sure.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Hey Justin, thanks for being here. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, went through a little bit of a career change and starting to get back involved with community issues again.
Congrats. Thanks for being here. Hi Erin, welcome. We'll give people a few minutes to get on before we get started. Did you say something about a bowl? It is 6:05. Usually we've had people kind of trickle into these, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Alex Baca. I'm the DC Policy Director for Greater Washington. We are co-hosting this session with Christine Mayer from DC's Vision Zero team. This is our second ward-specific road safety kind of information session. We did a general information session about 2 weeks back. I know some folks who were signed up for this were able to attend that, which is great. Some of this will be a little bit of a review. We'll be able to go a little bit deeper into sort of what's going on specifically in Ward 7 and questions that you have about specific projects. So this is part of a series. We did Ward 5 last week. This week is Ward 7. Next week, we did Ward 8 last week. This week is Ward 7. Next week is Ward 5. And the sort of point of focusing on the eastern side of the city is because the road safety statistics are pretty bad. And they're your ward specifically is sort of is a dangerous place to be based on road safety statistics. So Christine's going to talk about that, and I am here to sort of facilitate, answer questions from the advocacy perspective, because Judy Wash does work on land use, housing, and transportation issues. We have until about 7:30. Both Christine and I are available for follow-up questions, and just generally, thank you for being here. We'll start with the presentation and then go from there. Feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat, that kind of thing, as Christine's talking or as I'm talking. So thanks, and I'll turn it over to Christine.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I think you have to make me co-host first, so. Okay, great. And Alex, I'm not able to see chats when they pop up, so if you could sort of shout out as I'm presenting. I have one screen, so.
Cool. Yeah, I will make sure that they get to you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so welcome. Thanks for attending. First, I wanted to go through in our intro session. We didn't get into the budget info as much in the schedule, so I'll give an overview of that. We'll look at ward data for Ward 7, the mode shares as it relates to crashes, not to the overall census. I didn't get that data in time. And then projects going on in your ward, and then who your points of contact will be. So first, in terms of budget, so there's generally two pieces to the budget. There's the capital budget. Think of this like buying your house. This is like one-time bigger purchases for the district. Those are programmed into our 6-year plan. And they do things like buy buses, fund major trail projects, things like that. They fund buildings as well, our schools, our government offices, the land that we have, our infrastructure, parks and such, and then other things like fleet, our computer systems and servers and all of that as well. DDOT capital projects are specifically listed under there, and you can find those in our 6-year transportation improvement program plan. STIP is the short term for that. That is published usually on our budget website as well. And then there's the operating budget. So if the capital side is you buying your house, the operating budget is you paying your water bill or your light bill. These are the recurring expenses just to keep the government running. So employee salaries, public services like education, public safety, and so on. So a good example here is the District of Columbia will fund public schools. The program is in our public schools direct services, the activity at Langdon Elementary, and then the service at Langdon Elementary is special education, just to give one example. In terms of budget process and schedule, right now we're in May, where we're going sort of back and forth with council, hearing changes that they want to make to the budget, changes that the mayor wants to make, and trying to reconcile that to get to a budget vote. And then after that, there's a second vote. It will go to the mayor for final signature, or she can veto, and then the conversation continues. After that, DDOT and other agencies begin looking at our budgets, both capital and operating, over the summer. We start putting in project requests and program funding requests and things like that. Operating programs obviously kind of stay the same generally, but any new capital projects need to sort of go through a specific process. Then our fiscal year begins in October, the very 1st of October. We're in the same line as the federal government. And then the mayor will begin developing operating budgets for the next fiscal year. In December, council will pass a budget submission resolution. January is when council finalizes performance and budget scheduling. Then you start to see the performance hearings, performance and oversight hearings that run through late winter to early spring. The mayor usually submits a budget in March and presents that to council. Council holds budget hearings, as you've all maybe been seeing going on. And then there's budget sessions within council to talk about what they would want to add. So it's kind of a cycle that keeps running in that way. Any questions about that before we get into Ward 7 information? Okay. If something comes up, we can always talk about it later at the end. All right, so Ward 7 data. So all of this data is public. So we've got an open data layer of crashes. That one is mostly up to date. Sometimes there's issues with if a serious injury turns into a fatality, some updating that needs to occur there. But for the most part, that's comprehensive of all the crashes that occur in the district. We've got a dashboard to make the crashes easier to use for folks that don't know, GIS and statistical software as well. And you can go and look at our website and look through and really target certain areas that you want to look at, different types of crashes, modes, and all of that. So that's all on the Vision Zero website. We've also got a safety intervention dashboard that describes some of the things I'll talk about a little bit later in more detail, what each of the treatments does, what the purpose of it is. And then if a serious, like a critical or fatal crash happens, we always publish a memo that details what the circumstances of the crash was, what DDOT looked at. Whenever we went out, we always go out to every major crash site with the major crash unit in MPD within like 24 hours or the next business day, depending on when the crash occurs. Look at the site, take pictures, document what was going on, and then review that site within the next week with a multidisciplinary team. We look at different ways that we could add safety improvements to either that would have prevented that crash, or regardless of the crash circumstances, ways to improve safety at that specific location. So that's led to things like at Wheeler in Mississippi, we put in left turn traffic calming, some curb extensions immediately after the critical crash that happened on walk to school day, I think 2 years ago now, with the father and his two daughters. So we were able to act quickly in those scenarios. So this is what the dashboard looks like. When you get to the website, you'll have a map and then key statistics here. At the bottom, we're currently at 20 this year for fatalities, but you can filter by the severity. If you want to look at all of the fatalities, any major injuries, minor injuries, you can filter by mode here. So if you want to look at only bicyclist crashes, only crashes where it was a driver, passengers, pedestrians, so on. You can also expand it to look at multiple years. I think we've got back to 2014 right now in this dashboard. Then you can filter by your ward and even down to your ANC as well to see where the hotspots might be. Another thing on this is the tab up here is the fatality details. So with that, you can click that tab and look at the specific details related to a crash on a similar map. So if you know of one, you can click on that and pull up our memo about it. So in terms of ward trends, in a given year, the location of fatalities can vary. We know that there's risk in a lot of different engineering scenarios. but where the fatalities actually occur is somewhat random or varies year to year. So this is the overall fatality statistics across the district broken down by ward. And so wards 2, 5, 7, and 8 generally see the highest rates of fatalities of all the wards, with wards 7 and 8 usually having the highest numbers of the district. So this is why we're focusing on reaching out to wards 5, 7, and 8 especially. In terms of major injuries, we are seeing a downward trend, thankfully, but not as steep as we'd like it. Of course, we'd like to be at 0 at this point. But generally, we still see high numbers of major injuries in ward 7 and 8 as well, as the highest proportion compared to other wards in the district. So by mode, this is a breakout, this map here, of what it looks like over the past 6 years of data for Ward 7. This is the 2022 ward boundaries. So we see a lot of single occupant vehicle crashes, a lot of occupants and motorcycles here. Pedestrians are high as well. Not as many bicyclists. A lot of times that kind of depends on who is biking, where they're biking, how often they're biking, and the presence of infrastructure as well. So we, as part of the 2022 update for Vision Zero, we looked at our high injury network and tried to reestablish our high injury network, looking at both density of injury crashes and the severity of these crashes. And so we identified 3 tiers essentially of our highest priority corridors. So the red that you see there are high injury segments and corridors. The light red is the entire corridor. There's the orange, which are tier 2, representing more of the ward focus, supplementing that tier 1. And then tier 3 or 2015 are the corridors we identified in 2015 as being high pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities, and still remained important to safety work. So for Ward 7, our highest priority corridors are Eastern Avenue, Southern Avenue, Minnesota Avenue, Benning Road, East Capitol, Pennsylvania, Alabama, and then the little piece of Good Hope that touches Ward 7. So projects. I'm going to walk through a little bit more on how a project becomes infrastructure, common safety treatments that we use, talk about medium to mega projects, and then show you how you can find out what completed safety treatments or interventions we've done. So sometimes we will sort of phase in corridor safety treatment. So we'll see some hot spots along a corridor or a hot spot at an intersection that's high injury. We'll look at that at the crash types that are there at that single intersection or segment, do some quick installation treatments, look at signal timing and things like that, and the crash dynamics of that, or the crash types for that area. And then we have guidance that comes from our federal partners on what the best treatments are for certain types of crashes. So we compare the crash types to the recommended treatments for those scenarios, and then we'll do spot treatments like that. If issues continue along that corridor, we'll do a quick build or look at like a quick delivery project. So we'll look at other priorities for the street segment if there's an existing livability study that recommended further treatments or things that we could advance that are in Move VC in the pipeline as well. Then we'll monitor and adjust those as necessary. And then those often feed into a large capital streetscape project. These are where we're moving curbs, we're making things permanent with concrete and bricks, and building new signals, things like that. Major construction for capital streetscape. So a long-term plan or vision could look like what's going on Alabama Avenue, where it's a really important corridor to both wards. So we're looking at what the future of that street should be, and how to serve all of the modes that have been identified in Move DC. And Move DC, if you're not aware, is our long-range transportation plan. And I can share a link to that if you want to look at it in detail. So I talked a bit about the capital project process in the first, the general session, but quick delivery projects look a little bit different. So with those, it lasts about 2 to 5 years from start to finish. So we look at sort of a brief planning piece of that, where we're looking at existing conditions. We start to develop concepts. We analyze those concepts, and then we start designing, all while doing a few points of community outreach and ANC outreach. After that is our environmental process. This is another expedited form to document any of the expected impacts to traffic, air quality, water quality, things like that. With that, we look at mitigation measures, and then we have a team in-house that typically handles that environmental piece. Then we go into design. That's where we take a survey of the street, and survey being like the pictures with the people in the tripods, make sure that we have the space in between the curbs that we thought that we did. And then we start reviewing or creating plans and going through rounds of review with different disciplines within DDOT and other agencies for their review. Then we get to final plans, which is 100% is what we call final plans. Those are ready for construction. We'll usually issue an NOI during the design process, usually about 65%. That's sort of the midpoint of our design process, when we know we better know what impacts are going to be, whether that's changes to parking or different things like that. Then after that, we'll go into construction, and there's typically a phasing involved with that. Sometimes weather can delay things like that. And our construction, especially markings in the winter, can be really difficult. Then we go in, have a final punch list and walk through with a construction team, and then close the project out. Generally, we have existing contracts to handle all of these quick delivery pieces. So we don't necessarily, like in the capital projects, we don't have to go out and ask people at every single point of the way, and for bids and to try and get information from consultants, and then contract with somebody to design something. These, we use existing contracts that we have, so we're able to roll them out quickly. I covered this last time as well, but just as a refresher, so DDOT projects sort of have 3 main buckets. There's the proactive ones, which are how are we implementing Move DC, and those are citywide programs and policies, whether that's with Vision Zero, our annual safety program, and safe projects, our mode focused programs, like the bus priority network, our bike program, our freight focused program. And then there's citywide standards and practices with that. So anytime we have a street paved, we bring all of the markings up to our current standards, and make sure we're complying with the laws and codes that DC has. Then there's localized plans and programs that are also proactive, looking at safety and mobility studies, areas around schools for safe routes to schools. And then there's bigger infrastructure projects like our corridor wide treatments that are usually like a mile or more, or intersection based. Those are the ones that are moving curbs often, and doing more extensive work to the street. There's maintenance, so infrastructure projects like replacing bridges, completely digging up and restructuring a street, different things like that. Asset management, which is maintaining the assets or the items that we have in infrastructure, so our streets, our sidewalks, any markings that we have that need refreshing. And then if there's any damage that occurs either from weather or from crashes or other reasons, replacing those as well. And then there's the responsive piece, which is spot treatments that occur after a fatal or serious crash occurs, or there's requests. We often get council requests, our traffic safety inputs, and maintenance requests as well through 311. So someone asked us to sort of explain more what we mean by complete streets. So complete streets are streets that move people by accommodating all modes of travel safely, comfortably and conveniently, and interconnected networks. So I like to think of complete streets as Vision Zero in action. So they do include sidewalks, ramps, level and paved places for people to wait for the bus, median islands and medians, curb extensions, bus bulbs, all of these things that you'll see in a corridor project or an intersection project. It could be markings and crosswalks, yield markings, stop lines, traveling lines, bicycle markings, that kind of thing. Then there are signs to help people know the laws or remember the laws. So signs to warn people that pedestrians are crossing ahead, that they're required to stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk, and then signals and signal timing as well. So hawk signals, different signal timing to better allow for pedestrians to cross. Okay. So common safety treatments. So first, how does DDOT determine what goes where? Well, first, in terms of like a traffic safety input, we want to know the problem that residents are experiencing. We look at resident input and data that we have, speed data, crash data, other inputs for that specific location, whatever's existing. Then we'll collect more data. So we'll look at street images, maybe collect some more street images, look at traffic volumes, collect speed information, and start to get an idea of what the geometry is at the location. Then we'll look at the context around that location. So what is the street type? What's its function and sort of connection to the rest of our network? What kind of buildings or land uses are around it? So like if there's parks and schools or metro stations nearby, and then what's existing on the street. And then after that, we'll recommend and apply those engineering best practices. I talked about this the first time, but we do follow these transportation standards and guidelines. From the federal side, we've got a lot of guidance and manuals to follow and to go by, mostly the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or better known as MUTCD. You'll hear traffic engineers talk about that a lot. There's the Green Book by AASHTO, which you see on the screen, which is a geometric design of highways and streets. And there's Highway Safety Manual, and this is the manual that tells us if you've got this crash type, these are the countermeasures that you should look at for different kinds of locations. Then we've got state standards. We've got our own sort of MUTCD, which is our design and engineering manual that builds off of the federal MUTCD. We have construction standard building specifications, so how things, should look when they're constructed. We've got MOVE DC, which is our long-range transportation plan to guide what goes where, what types of modes we prioritize on different streets. And then environmental manual, also sort of complying with our federal standards, but tailoring it for the district in our processes. And then we've got localized guidelines. So if we've got a livability study, we'll follow that. If Office of Planning has established certain like design guidelines and has published a report, we'll follow that. And then there's mode specific design guidelines that go into what is recommended to go where, which again is based on federal guidance as well. Okay, so these are common types of safety treatments. So the words at the top are more technical terms, but the picture should help explain it. So if you hear an engineer talk about vertical deflection, they mean speed humps or speed tables or raised crosswalks, things like that. These are things that slow people down by forcing drivers to go over them. There's horizontal deflection. This slows people down by forcing drivers to go around them. So over, around, go on a bear hunt. So constructed items that force street users to reduce their speed as they navigate around the items. So median islands, refuge islands, curb extensions, roundabouts, mini roundabouts like this one in the picture, other things like that. Access management or operational changes. So let's say we have a lot of turns on red where a lot of pedestrians have been hit. We'll install no turn on red signage. That way people are not hit while right turning vehicles are trying to go. We can look at closing off places where left turns have led to injuries and fatalities, or just even like the installation you see here on the screen, slowing down left turning drivers so they're able to see people crossing better. There's visibility enhancements. So these help notify drivers of other street users that are going to be crossing or that they should know about. So this is a rapid flashing beacon. So you see the lights here that will blink on and off to let people know that someone's crossing if you press the button. Then we have these in the center here are hawk signals. Those are official traffic control devices, like official signals where drivers are required to stop when the lights are red. And then there's notification signage like this crosswalk here with the signs. They just let people know that school kids are crossing and to be more aware. Again, signs, they help communicate the rules of the road and district laws about how people should behave. So we've got a DC law that requires drivers to stop for people crossing in a crosswalk, especially if it is a mid-block crosswalk or stop controlled or something like that. And then guidance on how people should act at intersections. So if a lane ends and that left lane turns left, we'll put up signs like these that you see. We do pavement markings also to sort of delineate space and separate different users or different speeds. So parking, you'll often see kind of parking boxes, you'll see these daylighting, curb extensions. This helps. The daylighting curb extensions particularly, they help pedestrians have shorter crossing distances, and it slows drivers down as they turn and as the driver is slowing down as they turn, they're better able to see people trying to cross the street. So fewer crashes and fewer injuries and fatalities where all of these treatments are put. Then we've got intersection treatments. These are safety treatments that reduce or mitigate conflicts between street users. So again, curb extensions, adding traffic controls, which new signals or stop signs where those are warranted. The geometrical changes at intersections, no turn on red, protected left turn pockets. That means when you have a left turn space in the street, that's a lane, and you have a left turn arrow and it only turns green when no other pedestrians are crossing or traffic is moving. So you have a dedicated left only kind of phase in the signal. Signal changes, these are safety treatments at traffic signals that help reduce or mitigate conflicts between street users. So adding a signal, signal timing, looking at how long all of the lights stay red before another one turns green. If we get a lot of red light running in some locations, we can look at the all red phase is what it's called. Leading pedestrian intervals as well. DC has about 90% of our signalized intersections have leading pedestrian intervals. This is where you get a head start in front of, like, it's usually 3 to 7 seconds in front of turning or through moving vehicles. So pedestrians can are better seen by drivers as people are traveling through the intersection. And then there's automated traffic enforcement. So these are stop sign, speed cameras, and now bus lane cameras that enforce the rules of the road. So if at certain hours you're not supposed to be traveling in that bus lane and you're doing so for multiple blocks, WMATA is now putting cameras on their buses to enforce those lanes as well. Red light and speeding are pretty, I think, well known generally in the district. We do rotate cameras around to make sure that we are sort of maximizing the locations that we can and seeing safety benefits. And we are going to be expanding that program now with the mayor's budget and hope to see more automated traffic enforcement to make it safer for people to slow down. Then around schools, there's school safety treatments. So those can be any mix of what you've already seen, depending on the location, as well as crossing guards or traffic control officers. The schools will have pickup and drop off plans and circulation that they've worked out and other kind of relevant safety measures. So again, context is key where we're putting each of these safety treatments. Nearby facilities like schools have a large impact on what we can or can't do. The street type land uses are move DC mode priorities and crash data, traffic data always feeds into all of this. So I'll stop there for a minute. Any questions about these different treatments? If not, I'll go into more projects and where you can see some of this in your ward.
Good day. My name is LaRon, Ward 7 resident. Thank you for being here. Quick question. How are the size of speed humps decided? Are they all supposed to be built the same, or how are those decided?
So there's a couple different types. So let's see, in this gold book that you see here, we have standard drawings or construction drawings for a speed hump versus a speed table. I think maybe there's one more in there, a raised crossing. Those have slightly different specifications for how they're supposed to be built, but generally they should all follow this manual, what's in that manual.
Okay, I'll look for that manual. Thank you.
Okay, if it's not public, let me know of a location and I can follow up with your community engagement person, which is Miss Tanya Powell, and we can go back and forth and see if there's an issue with that specific one.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Ebony, you've got your hand up if you want to go ahead.
Hi, yeah. So thanks for giving this presentation. So I'm the ANC commissioner for Kingman Park. My SMD is 7D05. And we recently had a pretty big project, the C Street project. And by and large, it's been a big success in terms of the new protected bike lanes. But it's left us with an intersection change that that everybody is ignoring. So the left turn from C on and 21st Street, many drivers take that left turn to go up Oklahoma Avenue and towards Benning Road. And if they live east of the river, that is their most efficient route home. So there's new signage that says no left turn, but if they don't make that left turn, they end up going around the stadium. And so most people are continuing to take it either illegally or they will make a U-turn, into the neighborhoods. Some of them will take 19th Street, but not all of them. So I have been trying to work with DDOT to get that fixed, but have not really received a whole lot of engagement on that. Can you kind of touch on what the best way to get that resolved would be?
Yeah, you said it was 21st in Oklahoma?
Yeah, so the intersection is C and 21st Street Northeast.
Got it, okay.
And Oklahoma Avenue, part of the reason why, well, the explanation I was given was that at the time they did a study back in 2015 that said not a lot of people relied on the turn.
Okay.
But there's now the fields. And also if anybody who lives east of the river, like in River Terrace, they would have to take that way home. So I've got video of people making the left turn and it's super dangerous because they're just turning basically into oncoming traffic coming off the Whitney Young Bridge, the Whitney Houston Bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll take a look at the design plans for that location for C Street, since it's a sort of, I don't know if it's completely done yet. But your community engagement representative, Tanya Powell.
She's been great. Yes.
Okay, good. So if you've been in touch with her, if something is in the plans that we can do, I'll take a look at that. But otherwise, it may be something, if the project is closed out, that we have to look at through a separate process.
Okay, that would be good. And then, are there plans for protected bike lanes on Benning Road?
I don't think that's in Move DC. I know Benning Road is a bus priority corridor. Over the bridge with the Benning Road streetcar project, there's protected bike lane it's kind of like a trail, like a separated trail. That
Christina, I think you froze. Sorry.
add how we can add treatments to these certain locations or further studies that have already been done. So district-wide, for this annual safety program, we look at 25 or more high injury intersections that aren't otherwise covered by projects, 35 livability study recommendations across the district, and try and design and build those. We typically will do 1 to 2 corridor safety projects, look at pedestrian crossing improvements, like signage and markings, speed feedback signs to let drivers know when they're exceeding the speed limit, and then assessments for bigger corridors on the speed limit, whether that should be lowered or not. So there's a dashboard, again, on the Vision Zero website that you can get to from the engineering tab. You can see where all of these things are. So bigger projects are corridor level capital, either intersection or network projects. So they can include all of the things that I've talked about or even more, like new bridges. So they involve corridor level reconfigurations, sometimes reducing the number of travel lanes. We'll add bicycle facilities, bus facilities, or more. So one key project going on in Ward 7 is I'm managing this project for Southern Avenue between Pennsylvania and Benning, looking at the safety issues along this stretch of road and looking at ways we can improve safety. So we're with this project, we're looking at crash types and trying to identify specific safety improvements that would help with those crash types. And so we've had some community engagement and talked to the ANCs. And so we're looking forward to hopefully getting a final concept with that and then building it this fall. There's bus priority projects in your ward going on. So Minnesota Avenue, Nanny Helen Burroughs, and then Benning Road, reconstruction and streetcar. That includes transit improvements for buses as well as streetcar extension. There's capital projects. So we have a capital projects website. I'll add the link in the chat for that as well later. But these are, this is a specific page dedicated to your ward, and it's got a map. All of these are clickable segments or points. You can go in and see what was planned for this. A lot of the little pieces here in the green and red are paving. That's upcoming. And then some of the bigger ones are either like project areas or things that were recently completed in your area. And then if you want information about specific projects, each one should have the website down here if it's a bigger scale project. Ward 7 bike projects. So there's one on Minnesota Avenue, Branch Avenue, 17th, 19th, and a little piece of North Carolina that's in Ward 7 as well. These are planned for this year, and then to be built either later this year or next year. And then also on our Vision Zero website, you've got a dashboard of completed interventions. This is where you can find out what safety treatments have already been put in your neighborhood. So the layer we're showing right now is the leading pedestrian intervals, the head start that pedestrians get at a signal. But there's all these other layers that you can look at where the curb extensions are, where we put no turn on red signs, new stop signs, bike lanes, pedestrian refuge islands. So we've got a ton of layers that you can look through and see what we've done recently in your area. And this section, I'll hand over to my colleague, Kelly Jong Olson, and she can walk you through who to reach out to.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Kelly Jong Olson, Community Engagement Manager. Happy to join this meeting to have a good conversation with stakeholders and ANC commissioners. Okay, so as you know, DDOT has a designated community engagement team. So I'm sure you are working closely with Tanya Powell, who is Ward 7 Community Engagement Specialist. So in this section, I'll be talking about, how we can work together, as DDOT and community stakeholders. Okay, next. All right, first of all, I want to make sure everybody in like Ward 7 community leaders know who to reach out in your community, which is ANC commissioner. I think I'm seeing few ANC commissioners here, but basically residents can locate their ANC commissioner who represent your area, single member district. So you can go to the ANC website and put your address and see who your ANC commissioner is. As you know, they are elected official and they are representing the single member district, which is pretty small, like a couple blocks within Ward 7. So I want to make sure that you are working closely with them, especially when you have a good feedback of a project, because when can you go to the next slide? Because when we because the ANC is the official voice of the community. So we work closely with them, and especially when there's any project coming up, we want to make sure the ANC understand, so the ANC can help us understand what community wants. So to get us some consolidated feedback. So make sure that if you have a really concern about a project or a question, so always good way to attend ANC meetings to address your concern and raise your voice, so the ANC can maybe pass resolution to DDOT to officially submit community feedback on DDOT project or programs. So this is my team, community engagement team. So as I mentioned, we have one designated community engagement specialist per ward. So for Ward 7, Tanya is representing Ward 7. Hold on one second, I'm sorry. Sorry, I have two kids right next to me, so they were making some noise. Okay, also, as you know, we have mayors, representatives who are representing Ward 7. So I'm sure you're working closely with Lawrence, Lakeisha, and Julius. So they are representing Ward 7. So if you have non-DDOT related concern, I highly encourage you work with MOKers so that they can help you address non-DDOT related concern. Because we want to mention MOKers because sometimes residents reach out to DDOT for non-DDOT issues. I mean, we're always, willing to connect you with other agencies. Sometimes, our resource is very limited. So we want to make sure community knows where to reach out to address comprehensive, concerns around your area. Okay, so as I mentioned, we work very closely with ANC. Yeah, so as I mentioned, ANC is the official voice for the community. So we review their comments with great way. So we review especially their resolution letters because those letters are passed through the public meetings. So hold on, sorry about that. My apologies. Okay, so as I mentioned, yeah, we are reviewing ANC concern, ANC resolution with great weight because it is required by law. So especially for any projects and any big changes to the community, we are required by law to issue a notice of intent at least 30 days in advance to let them know that what kind of project or new changes are coming to the neighborhood. So if you have any big concern or even support, please reach out to ANC so that we can receive ANC support letter or some comments through ANC. Of course, residents are more than welcome to submit their comments as well. But again, DDOT and any DC agencies required by law to consider ANC recommendations with great way. So it's a good way for residents to raise their voice through ANC. All right. Also, I want to make sure that all residents are aware of DC 311. 311 is DC government, website. It's not just for DDOT. However, you can request lots of DDOT services through 311. For example, traffic signal is out. This response time is 24/7. So you can call 311, or actually we do have traffic management center, which is 24/7 operation. I can put the phone number on the chat really shortly after my presentation. So you can basically call this number to report any traffic signal outage or outage or repair request. However, if you want new signal or if you want traffic timing adjustment, that's a different story because it's not a maintenance. For that case, you have to request traffic safety input so that our engineers can actually evaluate to see any new changes can be warranted. So I also wanted to briefly touch on TSI. You can also request traffic safety input 311, which is one of the most popularly used requests for DDOT. So if you have any traffic safety concern, you want to see any changes in your neighborhood or on your block, 311 TSI is the best way. So we want to make sure that you report detailed, explanation on what kind of issues you're experiencing on your block, on your street, so that our engineer can take a look at those, issues and see what kind of safe improvement can be implemented through this TSI. One thing I want to mention that we have a public facing dashboard, as you can see here. So you can track your request through those filters. You can search through your address. You can search through your 311 service request number. You can also use your filter for Word or your ANC to see what kind of requests are currently being investigated in your area. All right, I'll stop here, but I'm open to any questions.
I think that is about it for all of the presentation materials. So we have about 30 minutes for general discussion, more questions, if anyone wants to jump in with that. Otherwise, I can just talk for a half hour, but I don't think that would be very exciting.
I have a question. This is Aaron. How do you approach situations where your data is telling you that an intersection is unsafe and needs mitigation, but you're receiving community input, whether formally or informally, that they do not want to change there?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it depends on the project and that location. So, ANCs hold great weight, and according to the ANC charter, we do give consideration to the ANCs and their comments. However, we aren't required to do what the ANC wants. If it's for a greater benefit of safety, if we think it's really going to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, then we can go forward with a recommendation, whatever that might be. We do try as much as we can to collaborate with ANCs in the community and sort of bring them along and help folks understand what are the safety issues that are leading to us focusing on this location, and then what the treatments that we are recommending will actually do. But sometimes we can get there with folks, and sometimes we can't. Someone asked about livability studies. Yes, so these have changed names in recent history, but they are a sort of traffic safety and placemaking kind of effort to look at a neighborhood or a street network as a whole. So like taking like an ANC as a whole, and looking at what the network is, what the crashes are, what are opportunities to give back some space to people if it's not necessary for the street network, or just kind of general traffic calming, to make sure that we have like a network approach, and we're looking at the street grid as a whole, rather than putting spot treatments here or there, which can sometimes kick the issue to the next block.
Just to add a little bit about the livability study, we no longer do that. There was a reason why, because livability study was for like entire neighborhood. For example, like that means it's a huge, right? That's why it takes like a lot of time for us to implement. And by the time we are ready to implement, it's already like 10 years sometimes. And it's meaning the traffic pattern, like the existing condition have changed. So that's why we are now no longer do a livability study. Instead, we're doing a corridor level. For example, like North Carolina, North Capitol Street, or like Minnesota Avenue, like corridor wide, instead of like like neighborhood, because we realize for like neighborhood level, there are so many other things we have to collaborate with other, agencies, not just traffic issues. So just want to make it clear that we no longer do that for reasons.
Yeah, and even the most recent one that we did do was really reduced in scope to just focus on sort of traffic calming. Miss Davinia asked if we could update on the East Capitol project. So right now, I actually just submitted my comments on the 30% design. And so they're moving into scoping for that 30%, which the scoping part is DDOT coming together and making a list of to-dos basically for a consultant. And then we'll put that into the system that we use to buy things, our procurement process. So then we can ask consultants to tell us how much they think that to-do list is going to cost. And then we will pick somebody to finish that design out. So that's where we are in the process. So looking at, we've got 30% design, we're looking at improving that and moving forward with the design.
And I know you went over this, but just a refresher on what 30% design.
Oh, yes. So 30% design is taking the kind of lines on paper or like concept that we come up with in a planning process and applying measurements to that. So like this lane is going to be this wide and this crosswalk is going to look like this, and different things like that. So this is like really pen to paper.
And typically, like, as you noted, like there's a comment period after that 30% design, like because it's before it goes into procurement, so that can kind of shape, again, like in asking for bids on a to-do list, like what some of the refinements to that might be. But
yeah,
I do try to remind people that like just because it's at 30% design, like doesn't mean that it's permanent, but it also means that it's pretty fully baked, like that there's room to move things around, but it's not like the time to make substantial changes to something, so that there is the ability to adjust things at the margins, but that's like not the point at which to say like this project is terrible and we should start it over and this, that, and the other, because like it is to a pretty considerable like point in the process, even though 30% like doesn't really sound like that much. It's actually a pretty considerable milestone.
Right. And she's also asking, is the idea to widen East Cap? No, it's to make modifications within the current space that we have. In some cases, we'll widen the sidewalk where we can, but yeah, for the most part, it's sort of looking at the space that we have and not trying to widen it.
Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I asked a similar question at the general, but it was actually about East Capitol, where we were talking about the Move DC plan as the part to contribute feedback, and then the 30% design becomes much harder. And I'm interested, I mean, I have several questions now that I know that you've reviewed the project directly as the Vision Zero coordinator, and to know your perspective on it. But there were some pretty substantive changes to that I would say were pretty large, and I'm not sure at this point how much we are able to change them. I mean, the largest being that there's no connection across the river or across the 295 and CSX, but there are many other issues as well, as like including lane additions at Benning Road and East Capitol, and an unprotected bike lane that runs along a 30 to 35 mile per hour road. So yeah, and some of the challenge is how long a project has been going on. So if like East Capitol started before we had a Move DC at all, before 2014, and so there is sort of an acknowledgement of, we do have to build projects eventually and not keep going back and forth. But within the 30% design, and as we're moving it forward, I am asking questions like, do we need this third lane at Benning Road?
Is what does the traffic analysis say currently? Do we need to redo that traffic analysis because travel patterns have changed? So there are things that we do sort of revisit through this through the processes. So that's where the scoping becomes really important. So if the consultant that eventually gets this project has in their to-do list to re-look at the traffic numbers and say like, oh, actually, we don't need that third lane, then that becomes a part where we can reduce the construction cost of that and sort of work within what we have. But yeah, it's a constant trade-off. No project is ever perfect by the time it gets to construction from when it was planned. There's a lot of changes that happen throughout that, both in the culture and the transportation industry, period.
Yeah, and so I live in Ward 1, but the sort of 14th Street south of Florida Avenue, the streetscape reconstruction of 14th Street is another good example of a sort of like pre-Move DC project. I participated in some of the very early stuff. I'm actually in a different job for Move DC in 2014. And it was sort of like interesting, but also kind of a bummer to know that Move DC had some just like better guardrails around it, kind of in terms of like how to plan projects, how to be consistent with projects, what their timelines looked like, while there were ongoing projects that were not working super well. So 14th Street, sort of south of Florida, down to like the Thomas Circle, if you are familiar with that, it was just like a really, really, really expensive capital project. And like, no shade to my DDOT friends on here, but I hate it, right? And I, you know, as the advocate who is hosting this, I think like the more that you can point out that like the potential addition of lanes don't really align with the district's own goals, the sort of more the Vision Zero team has to work with. It in some ways is frustrating to organize for something that is supposed to be better than it is, but that's kind of like what our jobs are in some ways. So just continually applying that pressure and being skeptical and submitting comments that like do try to raise an alternative view can be really helpful, especially like again at that 30% design point is a good place to take some of the things that we're raising in this session and saying like, hey, this isn't really aligning with these overall goals. And like, here's how like this point in the process, like something can be modified to make that more accurately reflect sort of both sustainability goals, safety goals, etc. Which is a very like garbled way of saying like, yeah, I mean, I personally sort of have to avoid biking on 14th Street, even though it has these sort of bus stop separated, like floating bus stop separated, like bike lane. It feels unsafe to bike on, it feels unsafe to walk on. It is better to take the bus on, but that trade-off is not ideal. And so I am totally sympathetic to the East Capitol stuff and like happy to talk more about that like offline if it's helpful in terms of like phrasing things, if you would like, in terms of feedback.
Yeah, just one follow-up on that, because when the 30% design came out and was shared at the ANC meetings, or maybe they had a separate meeting for just that, I don't remember, we organized a community letter signed by ANC members, civic association leaders, and sent it to DDOT that was, you know, a general like, this is great, this is exciting, here are 10 things that we're really concerned about. And the response we got back was a dismissal of all 10 of those things. And then we started to testify at council to get the chairperson of the transportation at that time to come out, the chairperson of the transportation committee today to come out. And then DDOT came out, and then there was a follow-up from that was like, okay, we'll take this more seriously. And so like, you know, maybe this is a question for Kelly, but like some of this like ANC Great Weight stuff and community feedback stuff, and like sometimes it just kind of, it gets a little frustrating to hear that when you think that you've done that pretty sufficiently, but yet it doesn't seem to have worked the way you are explaining it should work on this presentation.
Yeah, I totally understand this kind of frustration, and we hear that often. And also, we are trying our best to improve our system. And also it is, yeah, I mean, I see your frustration because, you know, you did your part and you went through ANC and then ANC submitted everything. And I mean, it sounds really frustrating that, you know, all of 10 comments were not, you know, accommodated at all. But I think our job is to make sure at least to explain why it cannot be accommodated if that's the case. So we are really required to like provide an explanation if we are not accepting certain comments. So that's something we are trying our best. I mean, working to improve the process to make sure at least we provide clear response instead of just one single no. We want to explain why it's no, and also try to offer some alternatives, you know, solutions to the concern. So we totally understand. So we are working to improve the process and, you know, the result.
And sometimes there are actual like physical constraints that we can't adjust, like the metro line that runs under East Capitol is a major point that becomes an even bigger project that then, you know, brings in WMATA, and we've got to like modify metro tunnels and they're like kind of vents and things. So there are sometimes constraints where we physically can't, within a reasonable budget, without it blowing up the entire street, make the changes that even we would like to.
And Kelly or Christine, maybe, I'm not sure which one of you is the best answer to answer this, but when, like, especially with like answering like ANC comments for Great Wait, like who typically like answers those? Like who writes those answers? Like who is consulted on writing those answers? What does that look like?
So basically my team, community engagement team, we are coordinating internally because of course we cannot, you know, provide very detailed, you know, like response because we don't have those expertise for this project. So we work closely with the project team. If it's about project, if it's about safety, we work with safety team to get those answers. And then we review and then we send it back to ANC commissioner. And then we can definitely connect them to the right team if they have any additional questions about the response.
Aaron, did you have anything else that you wanted to follow up on that?
I can talk more, but I didn't want to compare in the room.
I mean, I think you should. If you have additional questions, definitely go ahead.
I mean, I can just echo Aaron's sentiments. I definitely have reached out to Tanya, and she has been wonderful, but I had also reached out requesting a meeting with the manager of the C Street project, and he refused my meeting. And so it's been, I've gotten letters of support from our civic association asking for, you know, for another look at the intersection, because it really, and again, I'm talking about 21st and Oklahoma, 21st and C Street Northeast, because it's really not a viable, sustainable solution. And it's just been really difficult to get any sort of engagement for it. And it definitely feels like we've been given other project solutions that we haven't really been asking for. Like we've got, so 19th Street has become the only way to get into the neighborhood now that the left turn is gone. And so it's increased all this traffic on 19th Street. There's a new proposed protected bike lane proposed for that. We got, it was a 65% notice of intent, which after hearing Alex Baca talk about, you know, how 30% is a lot. Well, this was 65%, and it completely missed a school. There's Blow Pierce Elementary and Middle School. It's actually two schools in one building, and the notice of intent didn't include the school. And so they're talking about putting a lane right in front of the school. The school had no idea. I had to go and get the school involved, and
the school drops the children off.
right. And there's, you know, school buses, parents, and they get dropped off on two different streets, Gales and and 19th Street, because it's an elementary school on Gales and a middle school on 19th. So I really would like to see DDOT be more proactive about working with ANCs, and I have the same feeling that my Great Wait does not really feel that great when it comes to these projects. Thanks.
Ebony, this is like not at all an answer to your question, and I don't mean to like detract from it, but I have a question based on your question, which is, can, like, just because this I think applies to like the DDOT org chart and who does projects, like, Christine, can you talk a little bit about like the different teams under which some of the components of East Capitol or 21st and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the cross street, like that kind of stuff, like who is doing that, which team is doing that, and where do they live versus some of the other teams, might be helpful to discuss. And I promise I'm going to make a complete circle here, I think.
Sure. So so the C Street project, the East Capitol project, a couple others, as Alex has said before, they're the teams that move the curbs. So they're the ones, they're civil engineers, they're the ones who can calculate drainage and make sure that there's not going to be puddling and ponding. And they also sort of design the rest of the street. And the review process, though, is to send their plans out to multidisciplinary teams. So I'll get the plans. The safety team, which is separate from me, will review the plans. But we work together a lot. Bike team, bus team, all of these different disciplines, they sort of count on for subject matter expert input. So that's where every person is reviewing that, and giving comments. So that's our infrastructure project management, and they are under our chief engineer, and those are really the folks that are designing this. They're bringing it from the concept to the design. Now, where like in the first session, I showed a chart that had sort of when you can give the most input versus the level of detail. So the sweet spot are the corridor projects where we have like a planning process, like Alabama, Bladensburg, a couple other ones going on in the planning process. That's where we're looking at different concepts and looking at options to get to that 30% design. So that's where we can say, yes, there's going to be a bike lane and it's going to look like this, and there's going to be parking and or not parking, or a bus lane or streetcar, whatever that is. All of that is sort of included in the final piece of that, which is the 30% design. That comes from the planning arm, which is either our major projects planning group, which is led by Ed Stoloff, and they're in the planning and sustainability administration, or that will come from a specific mode focus team. So like the bus priority team or the bike priority team, or if it's a safety priority like Southern Avenue, and then I have one on Good Hope Road as well. Either I or the safety team will take that project on and try and lead that. But the bus projects, bike projects, and corridor safety projects are all quicker delivery. So those will most often be built with limited concrete, often not moving curbs, and paint and flexi posts. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. And like, I'm going to say that I'm saying this as Alex, who's employed by Greater Washington, and our friends at DDOT are not at all endorsing what I'm about to say, but I personally have a hard time working with IPMA. I just do. It's a lot of engineers. This projects are longer, they're heavier, they're more intensive. And there's kind of a difference in approach from kind of classically trained engineers and folks on the bus priority team, for example, safety team, like that kind of stuff, where the projects are slightly more quicker build and there's much more interface with the ANC and neighbors and people who are affected by that stuff. That is a distinction that I have experienced. I can philosophize on that a lot. I'm not going to do that on this call, but I think, you know, Ebony and Aaron, what you're kind of picking up on is a distinction between IPMA's approach to projects versus the planning and sustainability division's approach to projects. And that is something that has vexed me personally for a long time. It's just different. And I would make the argument that it's different in a way that disadvantages residents. That's not to say that that is a like broadly held opinion that should be ascribed again to DDOT, but that I think aligns with my own experiences in the difference between IPMA projects and PSD projects. And I think that may be in part what you're running into. So I think there's a lot more to like talk about from like a organizing perspective, because you have been really organized and you've done a lot of work. And I think that's really important. And I'm definitely happy to like follow up on that, since like what I wanted to get to in these sessions is at least like an explanation of how the agency is organized and why that does change how people experience interfacing and engagement with DDOT, and how it's kind of not uniform because different parts of the agency do things differently. So I hope that's helpful. Like, and we should definitely, like, I hate saying like, oh, we should talk more about this on a different call, but I do think this is like something that is worth pressing on as you have been in particular ways, and I'm happy to help with that.
I will say though, in their defense,
yes.
These engineers are not trained as planners. They are trained to take the 30% design and bring it into a constructible format. So they're not as familiar with the nuances and like changes to the industry and like, not that they don't keep up, but like they're doing the more hard engineering. So they could answer what the stormwater calculations are, but they couldn't answer that, you know, now we've got a protected bike lane guidance document. And you know, whether or not this adheres to that or not, or so it's just different. They have a different specialty than the other groups. So that's why it's really important to get in on that planning portion before we get to 30% design.
I do want to make sure we thank you, Kelly, for getting some of this stuff in the chat. I want to make sure that there's anything that we should highlight. If you can talk a little bit about the Minnesota Avenue Bus Priority Project, I actually think that would be worth saying out loud.
Yeah, I don't have whole details, but what I know is that I think the project is almost done, if not fully completed. So basically that's part of our bus priority project. So we install lots of safety improvements along Minnesota Avenue corridor. Just also like main goal is to make sure that it is safe for, you know, all roadway users, including bus riders, and also improving the bus circulation. Is that the right word? Yeah, and also we add lots of, you know, traffic calming related safety features along Minnesota Avenue. So we often get lots of, you know, concern and comments about it's so like a lot of traffic. I mean, we understand, you know, especially during rush hour, yes, it's congested. However, we really focused on, you know, addressing the, you know, safety concerns such as, you know, speeding issues along Minnesota Avenue. So yeah, so you see lots of, you know, flex posts along the corridor. That's actually intended to, you know, to slow down those the turning vehicle movement, and you know, because they're not, because a lot of, you know, some vehicles they're trying to like, you know, go around when there's like traffic, which is very dangerous, right? So those flex posts are actually preventing those dangerous behavior as well. Maybe I can share some website information if I can find. Give me 1 second.
I also just wanted to share the crash data specifically and focus it on Minnesota Avenue. So the Minnesota Avenue project started because we had a fatality back in 2020 on the corridor. We looked back at the data and we saw multiple serious injuries and pedestrian injuries and fatalities. So the section that we have worked on was a very high priority for safety. We saw a lot of speeding beforehand. And so we put in treatments, and the project manager I know had 20 or more meetings with the ANC and community on that project. So those are when we have those meetings, I've had this experience in some of the meetings I've held in Ward 7 and 8. We need projects to get the word out. We need ANCs to help us get the word out and get folks there to give us your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions on what you want to see on the street, and where the safety issues are that maybe aren't captured with the crash data. So those are, I just wanted to highlight, like, we just didn't pick Minnesota out of the air. It was because a tragedy happened. And again, not like last time, we don't wait for tragedies to happen, but if we have the opportunity to put something in and respond to safety concerns, then we do so as quickly as we can.
Erin, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, that is a perfect segue for my question. Is DDOT doing anything differently for outreach on projects and studies than in other wards, in Ward 7 than in other wards? Yeah, when I think about other programs in the city that do really well with outreach, something like the My School DC application, the Common School Lottery, they have a budget of $1 million, and it's almost entirely focused on 5, 7, and 8. And I know this is not your specific area, but like stressing that like outreach and engagement really requires a lot of time and energy and money, and like depending solely on ANCs as your outlet for getting people to come out and give feedback is like, I don't think the accurate approach or the best approach for at least Ward 7. I'm not going to speak on the other wards, but I assume it's probably true in a couple of others as well.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I mean, I just wanted to touch base, definitely. And also, not just Ward 7, but some other wards, we have very active like civic associations as well. I mean, we also try to attend their meetings, and because we know that, not necessarily all civic association and ANC, they have all the overlap, and, not everybody's attending ANC meetings. We have to totally understand. So we're also working with those civic association leaders, and of course, the council members, staff members, because they have also good resources, and the community leaders and stakeholders, and also MOKers, they are also eyes and ears from the community and also mayor's office. So we try our best to work different channels to hear, not just from ANC, but I just wanted to mention ANC because that's kind of our official channel, but I want to make sure that if that's not the only channel, definitely.
Yeah, understood. And MOKers and civic associations are great, but I still think that those are traditional channels and do not reach a lot of people.
I will say, before I was with DDOT and the deputy mayor's office, I was a consultant with a lot of DDOT projects, and I did on the ground, like walking neighborhood streets and putting door hangers on people's doors and sending text messages and direct emails. And there were times when I would send people, I saw this woman pull into her garage. I had put a door hanger on her door, and she showed up to the meeting angry that she didn't know about it. And I was like, I saw you pull in, and I had just put it. So sometimes it feels like no matter what we do or how extensive the outreach is, someone's always going to say that they didn't hear about it. So we just try and reach as many people as we can. And ANCs being the official voice of the community, we're required to, at minimum, go through the ANCs.
For sure. But the anecdote rings true, but also, I think my point still stands with or without the anecdote that using just the traditional means of outreach is not, I think, in the best interest of getting your message out in wards where that could be more difficult.
Yeah, I think there is probably something there, if you wanted to follow up on this, post this conversation, is what does it look like to ask for this in the budget? you know, you sort of noted that DCPS has a budget for this, and you're right to note that outreach is expensive. Like somebody has to do it, and there needs to be a plan for it. There's usually like you need materials and stuff like that. So some of this reminds me a little bit of like, yeah, I worked on the comp plan, you know, in my capacity at GGWASH, and like it was kind of a similar thing where like you know, for a couple of years I had to like, it was in my like budget request to like ask the DC Council to give Office of Planning more money to do like certain types of outreach. And we've still continued to make those budget requests around like small area plans and stuff. So I think there's definitely like, it is not like a out of left field like ask at all to say like, hey, like there are pretty severe disparities here, you know, the data exists, and that may require a different focus and methodology, like that, like as a resident, I would support my tax dollars going to. So that is definitely something that looks like a budget ask. You know, DDOT can sometimes fund things internally, but that's like to the tune of like under 50K. Otherwise, that kind of needs to come from the council and like a larger funding pool. But it's not impossible, and it's not a bad idea. Did we get everything in the comments? Kelly and Ashley, I am seeing that you are having some back and forth, which is great. Anything else that anyone wants to put out there? Since we're at 7:30.
I just wanted to thank you all again for having this meeting and taking our questions. And I hope that you'll put your contact information in the chat so that we can continue these conversations. And Alex, I will see you tomorrow. I'll be testifying or just participating in the roundtable with Charles Allen.
Oh, great. Yeah. For anybody who's interested, there's a roundtable tomorrow on traffic safety and automated enforcement. Ebony and I will go through there. I have yet to write my remarks, so it'll be a surprise to me too. But yeah, I think it's a definitely worthwhile subject that touches on a lot of this, and I hope that's valuable. We recorded this. I'll send out a link to it. Hopefully you can use it as a resource going forward. Thank you so much for being here. Obviously, like a bunch of conversations to continue, but that was sort of the point of this. So I'll put my email in here, also at abaca@gdwash.org, and definitely stay in touch. We have one more session. If you know anyone in Ward 5 who might be interested in this, let them know.
Same content, just
Same
from Ward
content,
5.
different ward. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye.